Oh, look at that. This and yep. And then right there is the chat video session board.
Yeah. Okay. Then let's. What about tomorrow? Actually, no. The social event is at 6:30. Right. No. No. Let's do tomorrow. Okay. Sure. Anytime after this, after this, right. Okay. 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 Very good. All right.
Hi, all. Bear with us a second while we're still getting prepped for presentations. One quick question. Uh, Normally in advance, I try to get a scribe. We have utterly failed to do that, was not on top of it. If anybody is able to scribe for us, please let me know. Tim would normally do it, but he's going to be co-chairing the deep dive half of the session, so a scribe would be greatly appreciated. Right, I meant to ask, Glenn, you are online, good. I don't know if you want to explain why you're not sitting up here or whether, what that is. So jump on in and say something.
Oh, that's right. I'm not a chair, so I can't actually run this.
So I have to have a separate Meet Echo session up?
Um, usually,
All right, except that only shows the queue.
oh, that's right. Yeah, he's the chair. He can. I
Right.
can't.
Yep. Where's DK? DKG slides are for you, right, though? So I can handle that in the...
So I do it all from the
Right.
data tracker meeting 114.
But I
agenda.
can do it from right.
Yep, that's exactly where you do it from. And then
Right, and then Meet Echo is right.
there. Back over. Boom, boom.
I'm already logged in. Are you for real? I don't. Oh God. Maybe I didn't have to go to the bathroom before this. Okay.
I don't have chair power, so I
Yeah, this would have gone a little bit more smoothly if. I was already logged into Data Tracker and it's asking me to do it again, and of course I'm not. Come on. Oh, check my email. You're kidding me. You last minute. Well, because it makes you think that you entered your password wrong. Yes, it was me. Verify new device. Thanks for verifying. Now let me in. Now I did type it wrong. Okay. Now we're there, and now I can log in via Data Tracker. It's logging me in. Right. I asked Glenn, but he's still not responding. Okay. Actually, Glenn, if you can hear me, please buzz in.
In chat, Glenn said his mic is not working.
Okay. Um, finally, we are in. Okay. Request browser permissions. Complete. Okay. And then we have, where is our chat queue? Oh, now we can do the presentation view, right? And yes, please go, Eric. Welcome to our area director, Eric Vink, who will has a very short presentation on some new plans in the IETF DNS space.
So I prepared some slides that will be into the materials, but it's basically 3 slides explaining that more and more drafts are relying on DNS. Tim was kind enough to make some statistics. If not mistaken, there were about 59 drafts that were using the word DNS in the title or in the abstract. So there are way more documents using DNS than the one identified by Tim. Some of them are from this group, from Deprive, DNSOP, or ADD, of course, right? And basically, those people in those working groups understand DNS, so I have no problem. But there are many more working groups relying on DNS. And I'm not sure about the knowledge of DNS. So that would be, I mean, you have review draft claiming DNS protocol or DNS infrastructure and doing very strange things with this. So the point of doing again the DNS directorate, and it's a decision by the ISG, the ADD, DNSSD, Deprive, and DNSOP chairs, is basically to allow early review. So when a working group has got a -00 or -01 that has been adopted, they can request an early review of their draft. Pretty much like the young doctors. Right? But having something called DNS doctors does not look very nice, so we call it DNS directorate, right, simply. So it will be created shortly after this IETF meeting. Warren and myself will be sending an email asking for volunteers. You can go to the last slide, would be superb. That's basically the statistics done by Tim. So the next step is really around August, I am sending, and Warren will be sending for DNSOP an email asking for volunteers for the reviewers. And the goal for us would be to get very experienced reviewers as well as less experienced reviewer, but they are eager to learn about what is the review task and basically become maybe more than a reviewer later, right? The goal of the ISG is really to get a pipeline of talents, right? To get from lurkers to authors, reviewers, Shepherd, chairs or whatever, and becoming a DOIEB member. So that's really important to get this balance. We are also looking for 2 directorate secretaries that are basically the person assigning reviews to the people. So that's, again, we will be sending this before end of August, most probably. So thank you in advance for stepping forward on this. And I give you the floor.
Well, we'll go back go back one slide, Tim.
I should have sent this. Sorry, DKG.
This was just a sample of what's kind of driving this, all of how DNS cross-cuts so
Correct.
many different groups.
Yeah. So this is Daniel Kahn-Gilmore, ACLU. So I appreciate this work, the attempt to try to provide an overview from the DNS point of view, but I'm also not sure that I know that there is a DNS point of view.
Fair point.
So I'm wondering, do you have a like any sort of rubric that you would expect reviewers to use? I mean, are we talking about like I run resolvers within my organization and I want to make sure this draft doesn't screw them up? I'm responsible for the authoritative zone. I'm thinking about things architecturally. I'm worried about cryptographic processes. I'm worried about UDP limits. Like there's a whole range of different things to think about. Do you have a way to tell us, if anybody wants to volunteer for this, what they should be looking for? Because people might be experiencing one thing and not another.
And that's a fair point again. So as usual, right, the perfect is the enemy of the good, right? So any review early stage is better than something at the ISG level later. So Even if not perfect, it would be nice. But I think that what I'm asking for the secretary of this DNS directorate, they know the experience of all the reviewers. And if they quickly look at the abstract of the ID, they could select the right person. That could be one way of doing it. But honestly, if we don't try, we will never know. That's basically it. Thank you. That's a good point.
Yeah, Jim Reed, please.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, we have
Actually-
2 more in queue right now.
Jim Reed speaking solely for myself. Eric, for the members of this Eric, so my name's Jim Reed. Sorry if people didn't pick me up in the mic there. Speaking for myself. Are the plans for the members of this directorate and the secretariat function that you were talking about here, are they expected to go through all of the submitted drafts to look for DNS-related content? Or will those that are putting DNS-related content in their drafts be expected to notify the directorate or the secretariat thing you're talking about? What way around is it going to be?
So the rules and the procedures will still need to be refined, right? And the experience will tell. But the expectation is really to the other working group chairs, right? Not Tim and the Brian of the world, but somebody doing young models, right?
Yeah.
Top of my head. Oh, maybe there is DNS content. I know I will request a review.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, else it's endless story.
Thank you. Paul Huffman, please.
Paul Hoffman. So I'm a little bit concerned, but you have time to allay my concern. I am concerned that one of the early reviews is going to come back to a working group saying, don't do that in the DNS, or you're doing it wrong. Is that actually, since some people will say, don't do it in the DNS, and a different reviewer would say, that's just fine or whatever. How are you going to, I mean, it's fine to say, for a review to say, oh, you got this a little bit wrong, but there's half the people in this room are don't do it in the DNS, and the other people are like, oh, cool, a new thing in the DNS.
Yeah, but if only the goal of the directorate would be to block early 2 drafts that were doing bad thing, I would declare success.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
This time the queue is empty.
Yes, thank you, Eric. So as a reminder, since we got a little bit of a late start, thanks to the clown show that was going on up here, I will just really blow through our slides really quickly as far as the chair slides go. You're all familiar with the note well by now. If you're not, then please look it up separately because I'm not giving you enough time to read it here. It is the standard IETF note well. The one thing that we've been asked to emphasize though, and looks like we have pretty high compliance rate in here, but in a meeting room, it is a requirement of the conference that you wear your mask, please. And then just a couple of other links for our agenda and all. Hi, I'm Dave Lawrence. Glenn is online. He unfortunately could not be in the room with us today. You just met Eric, our area director. And we wanted to put a special thanks to Andrew Campling, who recently, for the first time in the IETF, took on the role of document shepherd and worked through 3 pretty large documents and really helped get them advanced forward. So thank you very much to Andrew. We have really progressed these now through IESG review. The status of the documents is really quite solid. So in that 10 minutes of clown show, did any of you come up with a burning desire to be our scribe, please? Oh, look at that, Mr. Hoffman. Thank you, very kind, sir. Welcome from the chairs. Welcome. Bienvenue. Willkommen. AD comments. That would be you, Eric. He's commented. He's done. The status updates on our documents, of course. Glenn, I'm sorry, his mic is not working because I'm not sure exactly what he wanted to say about these, other than they have been progressing nicely, again, thanks to both the shepherding of Andrew and then very thorough IESG looks at it. There are a few discuss items that are outstanding. I don't remember off the top of my head which ones. I think it's for DDR. Glenn, please comment in chat if you wanted to make any special additional comments about that. I'm being told the volume's a bit low, but that might be because my face is not adequately in the microphone. And so the status right now, though, is really solid for these documents that are in IESG review and are expected to move forward to publication imminently, or rather they go to Auth 48, of course, for process, but we expect approval for eventual publishing as an RFC. Then here's the timeline. I'm not sure, Glenn, please comment in chat and I will be happy to relay it to the microphone what you wanted to observe about this particular document other than that it is a draft that the working group has adopted. And I will just wait for Glenn if you want to make any additional comment here. Oh, they have slides, so we're going to be doing a presentation for that. The DNS resolver information draft. Eric points out that the service speed document is also clear of all discuss, and so it is essentially through IESG at this point. And so here again are current drafts. Ben has another draft that is not gone through IETF adoption call yet, but I expect we're moving in that direction, right? Ben will comment on that.
Hi, I just wanted to correct that. This document is a document that went through a working group adoption call and did not get adopted. It failed the adoption call right here in ADD.
Right.
And this session we are presenting it again. It has been substantially changed, incorporating a lot of feedback, and I believe Chris Box will be going through the details of that.
Right, and I apologize for having ill-prepared myself to speak to that. Glenn's inability to be here kind of really threw a curveball at us all. However, I believe we are ready then to move on to our first presentation, which is going to be on, do you have the agenda? I don't know that the slides are in order is the thing. Okay, it's a split horizon one. And this is Dan Wing. Are you presenting? Dan is mic'd in from remote. Do you want to drive your own slides, sir?
Yeah, if you share them and give me control, that would work out great.
Right. Okay.
Lovely.
How do I pass control to you? Okay, I have to stop sharing.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what
well,
I
you can
thought.
drive
So
them
you,
for me, that's fine too.
Right. Oh, pass slides control. Look at that. There we go. It's like 4th or 5th item down on the list.
Okay. I think I got the right
There
one.
you go. Great. Take it away, Dan.
Cool. I'm Dan Wing. This is the Split Horizon Authority. It just became a 00 for the working group. In this, so as we transition this from an individual to a working group draft, we introduced and refined the term Split Horizon DNS and validated Split Horizon. They have kind of the obvious meaning, but we'll touch on them briefly. Updated the scope. Talked about how to use a pre-configured external resolver in DNS and have a little bit of detail on that, and how we are avoiding leaking the internal domains to external resolvers, which was a concern that came up early on. So terminology, Split Horizon DNS is where we are forking off a different view of what the DNS is from for internal use or for non-public use, and then what is on the public DNS. It's been around for a long time, frequently frowned upon, but this seems to be the closest definition, closest concise definition that we could reach in the document so far. And then validated split horizon is the thing this draft is mostly concerning itself with, which is make sure that when there is a split horizon, the owner of the domain, the public owner of the domain, feels that this split is legitimate. So this is what prevents this draft from being useful for filtering. And this has been some confusion with earlier versions of this, that because split horizon and RPZ are both kind of used today as mechanisms to achieve filtering, this draft does not help with towards those ends. The validated split horizon uses either DNSSEC or querying a public resolver to determine that the split is authorized by the domain owner. So that helps constrain our scope, of course, which has been our goal in the draft for a while. But again, it's refined a little bit in this version. So we're allowing the domain owner to authorize a split horizon view of their domain. So it's useful everywhere that this might be needed. So for home networks, enterprise networks, service providers, especially mobile service providers interested in this sort of thing. And that there's no prior configuration of the endpoint that a domain hint was authorized. It can all be checked by doing the DNSSEC check, like I said, or the public DNS check, the public resolver check. As I discussed. So these are the steps. What's in blue, so this is not changed, but this is just an overview. What's in blue are how things are learned. So this is not unique or introduced by this draft. What is unique and introduced by this draft is what's in green. So that's where we connect to the name server that claims to own this split horizon and verify that it's been authorized by talking directly with it. And that and some steps operated on the client are how we achieve that verification that it's an authorized split of DNS. And this is something probably want the working group to touch on, or to folks to kind of highlight to review, because we've kind of moved around on this text a couple of times. And that's how to best word this as a must not is what we have in there right now. But we've had a couple of comments on that. Exactly how to word this is how to do the DNSSEC validation in a way that doesn't weaken anything when we're trying to validate the split horizon. This kind of touches into, captive portal can't do DNSSEC validation quite yet. When we're trying to do the split horizon validation, oftentimes we are in a captive portal situation. So when that gets triggered and when we can start doing the local DNSSEC validation and when we're out of captive portal turns into an interesting timing issue that I think we would want to touch on and get some further feedback on from the working group. And read this section of the draft. And an important point, some of the review comments early on, I think we've resolved these completely now, but to not leak internal domain names. So we do leak out to the public resolver if the public resolver is queried that you have an internal split horizon, internal.example.com or corp.example.com or whatever that is, but we don't leak out the internal host name. So the super secret host name of www, we don't leak that out. Or the super secret host name of mail.internal.example.com, we don't leak out the mail, the host name portion of that. There's some interest in keeping that internal, not leaking that out. And to be clear, we're not leaking out that host name, but we do leak out if we are triggering off of that zone name, so the internal.example.com. And that's where we are with the 00. Again, mostly tying things up from the individual draft to the first working group iteration of this document. So are there any comments, questions?
The queue is open, please. Ben Schwartz, please.
Hi, Ben Schwartz. I'm one of the listed authors here. I think my big question here is really what changes do people want? This draft is, in my view, self-consistent, implementable as written, and so we're in the working group, but there's no reason to stay in the working group unless, and no reason to delay a last call unless there are changes that people want. And from the discussion during adoption, it does sound like there were some people who felt that changes were needed. So I'd like to hear those concerns and see if we can get moving on them. I want to point out that earlier revisions of this draft said something very specific about provisioning domains. And so to anybody who's still thinking about this in those terms, the draft has evolved somewhat, and at this point talks very generally about the idea of a local domain hint. And there are all sorts of different ways that your local network might tell you, hey, I want you to give special treatment to this particular domain name. And this draft claims to be suitable for all of those, including some DHCP options, for example. So if your network uses DHCP, it's at least in principle possible to use this mechanism in that kind of network.
Thank you, Ben. Andrew Campling, please.
I just wanted to say I thought the draft is good and it solves an important problem. So unless anyone else has any substantive comments, it'd be good to see it move to last call sooner rather than later, if we can.
Thank you, Andrew. Tommy Pauly.
Hello. Thanks for the document. I think one thing that'd be good before we move immediately to last call, since this is quite new, it'd be good to also see some implementation deployment experience in some networks that are doing this. The question I had looking through this, when we're talking about validating the kind of the authority over the hints, one of the requirements it has in there is that essentially you either are doing DNR on your network or you have like IPv2, other types of split domains. Is that a strict requirement? Like, essentially, I'm wondering, like, when we're asking someone to be able to do this, because there are lots of scenarios where our devices are in split DNS environments, are we saying like you must always upgrade to DNR before this is really viable? Are there other things that could be done? Like is some setup of DDR okay, or like is there something else that is a sufficient hit to upgrade?
Ben Schwartz, the restriction to DNR and not DDR is because DNR gives us a unique host name to identify the resolver. DDR does not provide us with a unique host name. It does provide us with a valid certificate that contains 0 or more host names. If that certificate contains 1 or more host names, then you could potentially use a mechanism essentially just like this. But it would require you to do this slightly odd dance of connecting to the server, getting a certificate back, and then iterating over the list of names that are in the certificate and processing them through, checking them against this list, looking for a match. And so it's a very unusual mode of certificate validation. And for that reason, we didn't specify it, but it can be done securely. So if you think it's worth pursuing, then that's something that we can certainly push on.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the main feedback I would like to see, because like, yes, I get that it is far uglier and it involves more steps on the client. However, I'm thinking, this is super useful for enterprise deployments where I imagine it will be far easier to do some of the updates on the back end to make it possible to do this validation. And some of their equipment, waiting for that hardware to support DNR is going to take a lot longer. So in the meantime, having a dance that the client can do that takes longer but still works is going to be very, very helpful.
Thank you, Tommy and Ben. I believe that's it, Dan. I had a notification that somebody was joining the queue, but I think they misclicked on their phone. So
Yeah, I saw that
we'll
come and go.
move on
Thanks,
to the
everybody.
next. Yes, thank you, Dan. Okay, next, Ahmed is a brief presentation on the resolver info draft. Thank you.
Yeah, so this will be, I would say, a quick presentation of the recent update we have on this draft. So please, if you can move to the next slide. So in these slides, we have a summary of what we have been in during the last ADF meeting. So this is the, we shortened the list of the attributes we currently advertising for the resolver. So we have something which is really very strict and limited. We also constrained some of the attributes that was already defined in the draft, so that we have some, I would say, this is mainly used for the diagnostics, so that it can be exposed, not exposed directly to the users. And the last modification and the important one we made is that we strange the validations that we are requiring for some of the consumption of the attributes. Next slide, please. So this is basically for us. I think that we, as authors, we think that the document is, I would say, in a stable state, and we would like to proceed with a call for adoption for this document, especially because this, I would say, met one of the chartered item we have on in this working group, which is explicitly chartered to provide a solution for, I would say, the discovery of the resolver informations. So, and we are another item is that we are using this solution for another solution we have in another working group to restrict some of the options we are using for the destructured errors that we are providing to the customers. So there is, I would say, a clear need for this solution to provide the two, one of the chartered items for the ADD working group, but also for other use cases. And we think that the document provides straightforward solutions, and we would like to, so that the working group consider the adoption, and that's it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Med.
Yeah.
The queue is open for feedback.
Hi, Puneet Sood from Google Public DNS. So the general structure looks fine. I have one question and one suggestion on the format. So the main question is, I skimmed through the list to see the discussion, and it's mostly the authors and Ben Schwartz. I have not seen interest from implementers, so I'm curious if there are client-side implementers who are willing to implement this protocol.
Yes, so this, at least for my knowledge, I'm not an implementer. I don't have, I would say, a client in which we will implement this. I am more on the network side, so this is a question for the working group. So if there are implementers that are interested to have this feature, it's up to them to disclose. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I would like to see some implementer interest before this draft is taken on board by the working group. The other, it's a suggestion, the format of the resinfo has like a text string for a bunch of DNS options. I would suggest it will be easier and more compact to basically use the numeric codes for the eDNS 0 options instead of trying to encode them as text. So you could just have one field which says, here's all the eDNS 0 options the resolver supports. And then you don't need any IANA support for doing that.
Yeah, this is something which is workable once we have, I would say, the draft adopted and so on. So that's, yeah, that's a fair comment.
Sorry, I didn't mean to distract you. It was a quick chair sidebar. But there is nobody else in the queue. Last call, except not that kind of last call. Thank you very much, Med.
Okay.
And now, Ben, I imagine, are you coming up for? Oh, okay. One moment while I get the slides up. No. Right. You're not required to. It's-
So are you sharing the slides?
Yes, we have no magic clicker. So you just go ahead and this is the verified selection of the upstream, right?
Yes.
So you'll have to tell me though when you need to advance.
Okay. Hi, everyone. So as Ben mentioned, there is a new revision of this draft that was posted 2 weeks ago. It's got a new name, so it's now called Reputation Verified Selection of Upstream Encrypted Resolvers. And this is all about these things. Yeah. So the home routers in millions of homes, sitting there in the corner, people generally ignore them, but they are hard to upgrade. And even if as an ISP you send someone a replacement router, often they just ignore it. So the question is, how do we give these people encrypted service? So Ben presented the previous one in Vienna, and subsequently in April there was an adoption call, and in that call there were some indications of support, but there were also some valid points made that we agree needed thinking about. So the structure and flow, quite confusing. It needs a normal introduction. It defines what was called a relaxed validation policy, which was seen as problematic because it didn't really go into what the client should do. There was a lot of discussion about the problems that could arise, but they're in later sections. Another comment was using the network's resolver without encryption would be better than an unverifiable upgrade alternative, and asking to see more revision and clarity, and having trusted resolvers would be far stronger than checking again every 5 minutes, which was one of the mitigations that we had in the previous draft. So if you go to the next slide, please. So the 0.2 draft is significantly changed. It's no longer informational, which is what the previous one was. This draft now proposes what clients should do. And what it does, it requires the use of a reputation system to give an opinion on the discovered encrypted upstream resolver. It leaves the choice of the reputation system to the client. So to be defined, well, not to be defined here anyway. Upgrades only occur if the reputation system gives a green light, and hence it has a new name for this draft, which is Reputation Verified Selection of Upstream Encrypted Resolvers. So the way it works is the client does a normal DDR discovery. The legacy DNS forwarder, which was the one in the picture, since it doesn't understand DDR, it just forwards that query upstream. The upstream recursive resolver has been upgraded to support an encrypted service, and so it replies with its details of how to access those services. The client ultimately receives that response and then executes this procedure, which is RVS. And that procedure verifies the identity of the offered encrypted service, and it then checks the reputation of those confirmed identities, if there are more than one. So, for example, that could be checking the identities against an embedded list of known trusted resolvers. If the determined reputation meets the client's criteria, it can commence using encrypted DNS towards the upstream resolver. So this is known as cross-forwarder upgrade. Next slide, please. So we did note two issues with this. So one is if the local forwarder is providing an essential blocking function, like for malware, it should be told to block this cross-forwarder upgrade. So we're assuming here that any resolver that is doing blocking has some means of which you can update what exactly it's blocking. So you can add resolver.arpa to that, and by that means you're blocking the cross-forwarder upgrade. The other one is clients should be capable of detecting which names are part of a split horizon. So they can exempt those queries from a cross-forwarder upgrade. So for example, .local, .home.arpa, and the names that are learned by local mechanisms are validated, as we've just discussed. And if none of that is possible on the client, then an X-domain fallback is something that can also be used. Next slide, please. So this is all about the reputation system. So embedding a list of known trusted resolvers in the client is only one possible model for assessing that reputation. So in future, a range of online reputation systems might be available to queried, and they could each return an answer according to their own specific criteria. So you might have on properties such as the jurisdiction of the resolver or its certification by a particular body. It's out of scope for the draft to define the query methods. It just notes that designers should be aware of bootstrapping problems in looking that up. It's the client's decision, of course, as to how to combine those answers, possibly using other metadata. But ultimately, it makes a determination of reputation. So if you are a developer of client software, why should you care about this? So as we kind of mentioned at the beginning, so there's a larger fraction of residential internet users rely on local DNS forwarders that are not compatible with DDR because they are on a private IP address and they are difficult to upgrade. So if we do nothing, it's likely that that half of those users will continue to be relying on DO53. And of course, that means that they are subject to passive monitoring, either on the local network or between that network and the upstream. So it's considerably quicker to enable encrypted DNS for a handful of ISP core network sites than to enable it for those millions of forwarders. RVS enables the use of encrypted transport in those configurations. Next slide, please. So in the draft, it does define a particular way of confirming the identity of the upstream resolver that we've been pointed towards. And in fact, the method is the one that Ben mentioned earlier about getting the certificate and iterating through, doing the dance as it was put. An alternative to that is we could just look at the service binding target name and use that as the resolver identity, but that would require the use of SNI and it would not be compatible with all upstream resolvers. The other open question is we could simplify the resolver identity. So currently for DO, the resolver identity is the URI template. We could shrink that down to just the domain name. That makes the reputation systems easier because you just have to define a reputation for whatever the domain name is. But the problem with then is you can't differentiate between different URI paths on the same domain name. So that's the draft 02 in a nutshell. Question for the working group is, do you think that's better? Would it be beneficial to users? And can the design be improved?
Ready for questions?
So, yeah.
The queue is open. And Eric Orth, please.
Eric Orth, Google. Mostly just a general vote of confidence. I liked the last version of this and thought it was the best plan to solve the problem of upgrading when the home routers are in play. And this new version, it does a lot of clarifications. It mostly mandates the part of the original strategies I wanted and allows other parts I wanted. And so overall, I'm still happy with this and still want to do it. So I'm still enthusiastic and I still want this to be adopted. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Eric.
Andrew Campling.
Hi, Ed. I just wanted to say I suppose on the second question that Chris asked, given I think we had stats possibly from Google that 85% of traffic comes from private IP addresses, that this is extremely beneficial to users. So we've got to have a solution to the problem of how to support consumers in probably most markets geographically around the world. This does it. So unless we've got a better idea, we need to move forward with this as soon as we can.
Thank you, Andrew. Tommy Jensen.
Tommy Jensen, Microsoft. I find the new direction quite interesting. If I'm understanding the presentation correctly, admitting that I haven't read the full text yet, that instead of trying to address the problem of if the upgrade was secure, it's more about somehow I got to a new resolver, and I would like to know if this resolver, independent of how I found it, is trustworthy. Generally speaking, I think that's a better security approach. So thanks for addressing that feedback. I will say in terms of interest and adoption that it's hard for me to imagine a way in which our ecosystem would benefit from having such a system. I say that because we've desperately avoided having a trust list. Note that the list of resolvers that currently ships in Windows is a bootstrapping convenience. We don't trust those resolvers any more than we trust any other resolvers. We fully rely on the user to select a resolver. And so the question I would pose in terms of interest in adoption from the client side is, if as a client I am having some custom solution to evaluate the trustworthiness of resolver, that means I have some idea of who I trust. Why not have some similarly out of band specific to me mechanism to simply provide the resolvers to the client? Thank you.
Thank you, Tommy. And the queue is closed. Thank you, Chris and Ben.
Okay.
Next on the agenda is time for open discussion and AOBs. If anybody had either something they want to revisit, some general comments to offer, Glenn and I actually do have an AOB, but we have decided to put it off till Ietf114 when we both can be fully engaged in it. So we leave it to now, you in the room, if you have anything that you would like to bring up. Tim's making motions like he did, but I think in that case, I want to invite Glenn to the microphone because he claims he has a working microphone now. Glenn, try your mic. Oh, he's on. Fantastic. Are you going to then address our planning and wrap-up agenda item?
Yeah, hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Do I sound really wonderful?
You sound like you're doing great.
So, I think in terms of planning and wrap up, thank you for being patient with us as we got the kinks worked out of the system here. I think Tail and myself work best when we're a team and when one of the team is actually working his job properly and not just dumping on the other guy. So my apologies for not holding up my side of the production quality here. Other than that, I think we're in really good shape. I'm glad that we've got the 3 drafts that are now going, through the final parts of the process. That's really wonderful. I want to point out this is the first time ADD has met in person, actually. Or at least the first time you've had one of the chairs in the room. So pat yourselves all on the back. We've done this in the last 2 years, all virtually. And the fact we've actually got 3 drafts now on their way off, and we've got a couple more good ones in the pipeline is quite the testament to how well this group has come together and worked very hard over the last 2 years. So my thanks to you for being a really good group to manage. That's all I've got to say. Over to you, Sale.
Yeah, along those lines, perhaps the pandemic actually worked in our favor. Ever since the beginning of Doe, there's always been this expectation that there were going to be a lot of fisticuffs around this whole topic area. And so the group has been remarkably civil, has done very well, and we're all very thankful for that. But that really would be the end of the ADD session, unless Eric wants to comment on anything. He's shaking his head no. So I would just, again, like to thank everybody for participating. You've been doing a wonderful job. And again, thank you to Paul Huffman for volunteering to be our scribe. And now I'm going to turn it over to Tim to run the deprive half of our session.
Thank you, Dave. And Dave's going to run slides, mostly because I've watched this laptop drop internet twice in MeetEcho during this session. So sorry, wireless, you're not holding up for me very well. So, welcome to the deprive section. You've seen the note well already from Dave. I'm Tim Wasinski. Eric over there is our very responsible AD. It's also his birthday. He's 29 years old, I believe it said. So any aging is because he's been working as an area director way too long. So, and what happened to Brian? Well, next slide. So we're very glad to see you guys in person. So the three of us. So I believe Brian's here someplace. So do it next. Yep. So it's not, yeah. So he came up with a very last minute weak excuse for not showing up. So he may be online to sort of say stuff, but we'll see. Looks like Barry has something to say. So please.
Yeah, this is Barry Leva. I'm asking about logistics for dealing with this. I presume that we all stay in the ADD session.
Yes, we all
here.
stay inside the ADD
And
section.
what about the chat, the Zulip chat?
It should be the same, and then what we'll do, they'll be combined into the minutes, and we'll probably break them out into minutes for both of us as well.
Fair
That's
enough.
what we did last time, and it seemed to work very well.
Thank you.
So I like to copy the minutes, copy the chat into the minutes at the end, is sort of like, it's because it's a great way to sort of track all the conversation sort of thing. So you've seen the code of conduct, you know about the masking policy. Let's pop off. Our agenda is pretty short. We've got some working group status, where we stand, things of that nature, and we're going to discuss unilateral probing. Daniel, he submitted some slides an hour ahead of time, which is plenty of time. I'm not sure why he was worried. So we're ready for those. So basically, sort of where we stand, and Brian will kind of speak to this as well, if he actually showed up for the meeting, is things are moving along, but they're kind of slow. We understand that. We're considering kind of maybe going dark for a little bit while implementations go on. It's like we're not sort of chasing people away, but we want to see some stuff get built and stuff played with. We like the work going on in unilateral probing, and we just want to see where things are going. And we're hoping there's some, folks, some implementers sort of show up and say, oh yeah, we've got something, this and that, et cetera, et cetera. So we're open to suggestions on that. We'd like to hear ideas from the working group on what else they think we could be doing on that stage as well. So next, I believe that's it for the slides. And I think then we've got Mr. Gilmore. So we'll let him take it away.
Yeah, I think I have to reload my MeetEcho session to actually get your slides, since they
You
approved
can
after.
do what you need to do.
Technology.
Oh, would have showed up there?
Yep, you just have to do the fancy remote thing.
Well, I tried the fancy. Hang on. One second, almost there.
This is the part where I get to sing, right?
Because yeah, it's not in, but it's definitely in the approved.
Go back there.
Okay.
Right there.
The
folder. Where's the folder? Click on the folder. Hit the reload.
This reload?
Nope.
Oh, that reload. Ah. Oh, updated. Look at all that unilateral probing. Here we go.
All right.
Okay, but now let's get it. It still doesn't show up in the presenting list, though. Oh wait, a new slide deck has been shared.
It's like magic,
Sorry. indistinguishable from broken technology?
I blame me. Huh? So I'm going to talk to you all about the unilateral probing document, which basically is about probing for encrypted transport between the recursive resolver and the authoritative DNS server. The basic idea behind it, while the slides come up, just as a recap to remind you, is that the idea here is people have some concerns about how well recursive resolvers are going to be able to make encrypted connections to authoritative servers. And we wanted to just get more experience without having to answer the hard questions of like, how do we authenticate the server, or when should we hard fail, or what do we do if there are problems? We just wanted to try doing it. And so the unilateral probing document is relatively straightforward in that it basically says the recursive resolver should just try. And the authoritative server should offer encrypted transport, and the recursive resolver should try encrypted transport. And it gives some guidance about how to do that in a way that minimizes excess resource consumption, that reduces the amount of clear text, but makes no real guarantees, certainly no guarantees against an active attacker on the network. The document has been through a couple of drafts. Paul Hoffman just came on as an additional author, which is much appreciated. I don't want to interrupt this the slides issue here, but the baseline for this is really not that hard. It's very similar in some sense to Happy Eyeballs, which we used to try to get IPv4 and IPv6 when you weren't sure what you could do. It's basically saying do a similar kind of thing between clear text DNS traffic between the recursor and the authoritative, but do it with encrypted transport. And there's a few parameters that it recommends setting about if you learn that you have a successful encrypted transport to an authoritative server, you can remember that for a short period of time and then use that to avoid sending clear text as long as you know that you are likely to have a successful encrypted connection. And it does all of that without any authentication requirements. So the idea is this is a baseline that hopefully can be then merged with some ability to do authenticated and potentially strict encrypted transport on that leg when that becomes available. So you've got slides there.
It's coming.
It's
Yeah.
coming? All right. I mean, I feel like the slides are going to be a real letdown after all of this. Oh, yeah, look at that.
It never showed up in the regular presenting queue.
All right,
so.
you hacked around it. I appreciate it. I did the recap there. Yep. So, so the primary goal of this draft, though, is that there should be no need for explicit coordination between the authoritative resolver and the recursor. That basically, this is really just about how do you just try in a way that doesn't make everybody on the network sad? How do we do it so that it doesn't scare people off? Next slide, please. The main changes in the latest version, aside from adding Paul to the authors list, is we took some discussion about maybe what the future steps might be and moved that to an appendix to not distract from the main point. Did some clarification about state transitions when sending over encrypted transport. The definition of the state transitions was slightly wrong. It was actually a little more strict than it needed to be. With this kind of happy eyeballs approach, we actually want you to, even if you got an answer back from clear text, we'd like you to keep trying with your encrypted connection because maybe you'll learn something on that try for the next time you have to talk to that resolver. Somebody, I think Sarah Dickinson, noticed that the way we were looking at how long we should persist was measuring from the first connection to the server as opposed to the last connection, the most recent connection to the server. So we were maybe timing out a little bit sooner than we should have been in the algorithm described there. So review of that nature, if anybody else wants to take a stab at it, was always welcome. It's easy to get these things subtly wrong, and people who have experience implementing can probably identify places where we got it wrong better than somebody who's just skimming the draft. So we definitely hope to see more implementers. On that note, next slide, please. Power DNS Recursor has announced that they are basically implementing this approach for ADOT, that is authoritative DNS over TLS. I don't know that it exactly meets the draft, but their approach is what they call, quote, just try it, which sounds a lot like this. I'll also note that the authoritative server for the powerdns.com zone is also offering DOT. The draft itself is agnostic about ADOT versus ADOQ, that is authoritative DNS over QUIC. So some folks might be interested in trying to do ADOQ as well. We encourage implementers to try that. I will note that after I wrote these slides, but before I stepped up here, I noticed that a.ns.facebook.com is answering on TLS on port 853. It may or may not be authenticatable if you're using a standard TLS stack, but again, that's fine for the purposes of this draft. So if you're running an authoritative a recursor and you enable this, you might be able to encrypt all the connections that go to Facebook. So that might be something interesting to be able to note. We're looking for other implementers to stick their head up and say, hey, I tried to do this, it worked for me, it didn't work for me, this is what we ran into. We want to ensure that it doesn't overwhelm authoritatives. So if you're an authoritative and you're seeing these queries, you want to report back, we'd love to hear from you as well.
I just want to ask if there's any implementers in the room who maybe want to start working on this, please step up and let us know, because we'd like to see more than just Peter out there working away in the corner, sort of quietly, sort of thing. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Tim.
Okay. Sorry, speaking up here, Benno Overheinder at Nelnet Labs. DKG, we will talk with each other about our plans and how we can collaborate and help you. Yeah?
Great, thank you.
Puneet Sood, the Google Public DNS. So I haven't really read the whole draft. I'm just reading it while in the ADD session. We do implement some version of unilateral probing. We have to see how much our implementation is different from what's specified in this draft.
Great. I'd love to hear feedback from that. And again, this draft is not claiming to be perfect, and feedback from implementers who have experience are welcome. Obviously, coming from Google Public DNS, you have a different scale of implementation than somebody who might be implementing it on an office network or something. Victor?
Victor Duchovny, Google Public DNS. I'm looking for operators of authoritative servers who will share preferences, particularly around their TLS tuning. Are they looking to do TLS resumption? Do they strongly want it? Do they support it? Any feedback on, the experience with timers, idle, and the like? I want to hear about tuning. Please get in touch, especially if you have DNS servers behind load balancers. I want to hear how that works with ADOT, all that sort of stuff. Thank you.
Yep. And all those details are details that I would be happy to include in the draft if you're comfortable with them being public. But obviously, also, if you want to talk to people privately, that's good too.
Right. No, I'm not operating an authoritative server, so I don't have anything to share.
No, I'm not asking you. I'm not asking you, Victor, to share it. I'm trying to amplify your requests, because I think that information would be very useful to have.
Paul Hoffman.
Paul Hoffman, co-author. For the people in the room who haven't read it or haven't been reading it carefully, the last discussion we just had is actually not that relevant. That is, the draft says if you're a client, go ahead and try and do these things. We believe, and if we're wrong, we certainly want to hear, if you misimplement the client side of the draft, you're not going to hurt anything. You may have some extra delays and such, but you're not going to be hurting any authoritative servers. If we're wrong, let us know. But so the whole thing of, the whole part of this is that there doesn't have to be coordination. If you're going to do authoritative, authenticated later, there of course has to be coordination. But for now, what we want is a document that says, even if you've gotten, this wrong about remembering and stuff, you're probably going to have negligible or literally no effect on the authoritative servers. So if you're an authoritative server operator reading the document and we've done anything that you think could affect you negatively, by all means let us know, because we would like to pull that out. This is supposed to be harmless.
Yep. And as a reminder, the document also offers guidance to authoritative server operators as well, in terms of how you probably want to configure your systems. And so if you're implementing this on the authoritative side and you think that that guidance is lacking or insufficient or wrong, or you think it's good, we'd love to hear from you. So yeah, next slide, thanks. Outstanding questions in the draft. There's a handful of fix-me's that are related to error handling, mostly on the guidance for the recursive resolver side. Again, I don't think that these need to be perfect, but it would be good to give some general results about the different kinds of errors you might be able to see. And if you've got some strong opinions about how you want that to happen on a on this opportunistic unilateral approach, be good to receive some text on that. There is a question about whether the document should be standards track as opposed to experimental or informational or something like that. I think we are leaning towards standards track, but we'd be good to hear from the working group on that. And there's some open questions about whether we want more explicit, like visualization of the types of steps that we're expecting the resolver, the recursive resolver to take. In terms of how it keeps track of whether it thinks it's got a good connection or a history of good connections to a given authoritative. So if folks are good at doing, flow control diagrams or things and think that they can do it, draw some nice pictures, that's always a welcome thing for implementers to look at. So come talk to me. I've got some ideas about how we could draw those pictures, but you might have better ones. So anybody who's interested in doing that kind of stuff too, happy to have contributors. Next. Yeah, so this is basically what I just told you. There is a GitLab repo that has some open issues on it, a fairly short list of open issues at the moment. If you want to take a look at those issues, or you want to grab the doc and flesh out a fix-me, we'd be happy to take merge requests. You can also just, of course, send messages to the mailing lists for anything substantive, because it would be good to see the discussion there too. We're hoping to have a version of this with all the fix-me's cleaned up before the next IETF, and maybe we will get an opportunity to ask for a working group last call then. But getting more feedback from implementers in the meantime would definitely be preferable. I think that's what I've got. If folks have questions about the draft or complaints or gripes or whatever, I think please come up to the mic line.
Queue looks empty. Thanks for the comments we have, and thanks for the work you all have been doing on it. So please carry on. So
all right.
Okay.
Thanks, y'all.
Yep. And that was it on our business. I think Brian finally showed up for the meeting, which is just in time. We're actually, unless, mic's open. If people have something to say, please speak up, except for you, Mr. Farrell. Everybody else is welcome to. No, no, thank you all. And otherwise, we're going to call this an early meeting, I believe, which we kind of figured it would be a short meeting. So thank you all for attending. So thanks for all the comments. Thanks for all the work, folks. So. Okay.